So this is the Dave Schecter Model 3. This is the third generation winder that Dave Schecter ever built. Ironically, I helped him build the second generation, which was 40 years ago almost. And the first generation were these he would take Stevens winders. He bought one or two from a place called Fleetwood Entertainment, which is, I think they make Travis Bean guitars. And he bought the Stevens winder and kind of retrofitted it and put 2 additional spindles. And Tom Anderson actually still has 2 examples of that type of winder in use today, which this is going to probably take over for some of those winders. Those winders are mechanical. He's got to change gears and knobs to affect the different wind patterns, layers of winds, how dense the windings are and whatnot. Whereas now you just click a switch and it takes a second. Okay, here's the latest version. You'll notice a bunch of more stuff on here now. This is after taking the winder down to Tom and the guy that winds his pickups actually talked and figured out what they really needed. Turns out this is going to be more of a production winder than a R&D winder, which is what I originally thought. So we added some stuff. First thing is this little click switch, like one of those. Now I'm going to have to show you a close-up of this, which you can't see very well right now to see what this does. But it's the program selector. Turns out Tom Anderson Guitars winds about 65 different pickups, and they need 65 different programs, so this switch will toggle through their 65 programs. Once the program is selected, then they can run it. Now I changed the jog buttons and added this switch, coarse and fine. So in coarse, if you hit out, you'll jog the traverse out 10 thousandths, and you'll see this display up there that it accumulates it. If you hit in, it backs it off 10 thousandths. If you set this to fine, it comes out in 2 thousandths increments. So very fine adjustments. And you also notice the same thing kind of works, this coarse fine switch also works for the spindle jog. Some spindles you wind, the pinouts are on the top, some are on the side, so you need to be able to kind of jog the coil around to reposition it. And this also works in fine mode. In case it gets a little out of whack, you can adjust it back to what you want. Now the hold button now has a couple of functions. The first time you hit hold, it'll stop a running program, but if you hit it again, it shuts the motors down and waits for you. It kind of sits there idle. Hitting the run button the first time turns the motors back on. If they're off, hitting it again will run whatever program is selected. So I'm going to run number 2. Okay, here's a close-up of the display. You notice the display says ready right now. If I hit the hold button, I'm basically saying, kill the motors. I don't want the motors wasting electricity sitting there holding position, and I'm not going to use it for a couple hours, so I can turn the motors off. Everything goes kind of blank. Hit run again, it puts it back. You notice there's the jog display, so you notice if I jog out or in, it goes in 10,000 increments unless I'm in coarse or fine. Now it's 2 thousandths increments. And then also up here, the turns. So if I run a program, it resets to 0 and starts counting up. This is a quick one. I think it only has 400 lines, 400 turns. And you'll notice here is the name of the pickup that's being wound. Over here is the pickup number. So pickup number 1 is, I just call it, this is just junk I made up, red velvet. Number 2 is squishy strat, and number 3 is hard strat 1. 4, 5, has nothing. That should go blank actually once it gets nothing. Okay, here's the underside of the winder. That's the traverse motor. This is just all plates holding, I don't know what the hell this is, some kind of, oh, there's a gearing in here you can't see. Yeah, there's a worm gear. This thing rotates, moves this back and forth. Here's a limit switch. This will just literally kill the motors if that's tripped. It'll shut off power to the amps to shut the whole thing down. And these are the traverses, and this worm gear is connected here, and back and forth it goes. Pretty simple, really beefy, and kind of reminiscent of the winders Dave and I built 40 years ago. The winders that Dave and I built 40 years ago were kind of like this construction. A very, very thick aluminum plate like this, blocks with bearings and spindles like this, a traverse underneath coming out, long traverse arm. The ones that we built had 6 spindles, and the plate was 3 feet by 2 feet, but everything else was mechanical. There was just one motor and gears all back here, gearings and cams to move the traverse, and it was a fixed fixed wind, at least initially. Then later they would change gearings and change up the spacing of the wires, but it was, I think, 100 turns per a half an inch was the standard Schecter pickup back in the 70s, late 70s. Okay, look away if you're squeamish. Here's the guts of the winder. So back there on the right, you can't really see it because it's got ribbon cables coming out of it, but that's the PMAC. This little guy back there. That's the main control, the motion controller. Back in there are the amplifiers. They take the low-level signals from the PMAC, convert them into very powerful signals that'll drive the motors. And that's the breakout board down there to get all the major signals off of that PMAC board out where I can get them. And then all the connections I needed to make down there. I didn't do most of this back panel. Somebody else put all this stuff in there. Dave didn't do it. Somebody did this all later. This wasn't in the original winder that Dave built 20 years ago. This thing 20 years ago didn't have all this stuff. But it was added, and I kind of made some sense of it, cleaned up the software, wrote another program to send winds to the wind definitions from across the network. And that's actually the next project. In fact, I got it over here. I'll show it to you. That little sucker is a Lantronix Ethernet to serial interface. So the PMAC is a serial interface, so I'm going to stuff that thing in the top of this winder, and then the winder will have an Ethernet connection, and you can talk to it from anywhere in the building.